This presentation will discuss functional behavior assessments. When a student's behavior consistently interferes with his or her own learning, consistently interferes with the learning of others, or consistently interferes with your ability to conduct class, a behavior management plan for that student must be developed. In order to do this, we first need to make sure the behavior is not due to curriculum mismatch. By curriculum mismatch, we mean due to the fact that classwork might be too hard or too easy for the student. If we feel the curriculum is appropriate, then we will want to conduct a functional assessment of the student's behavior. This presentation will review the process of functional behavior assessments. We will begin by discussing the possible functions of behavior. Then we will discuss why functional behavior assessments, or FBAs, are important. After this, we will introduce the concepts of antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, and practice charting these behaviors. Finally, we will discuss how to conduct a functional behavior assessment. While we discuss these concepts in great detail, this presentation will only provide an introductory understanding of this process. So, what is a functional behavior assessment? It is a collection of methods for gathering information about antecedents, behaviors, and consequences that is used in order to determine the reason or the purpose of a behavior. Once the function of the behavior is determined, the results of the functional behavior assessment, or FBA, are used to design interventions to reduce problem behaviors and increase positive behaviors. It is important to note that all behavior serves a purpose. It either serves the purpose to avoid something, such as an item, activity, or attention, or to obtain something. Or you can say it serves the purpose of getting something or getting away from something. Sometimes students might be trying to get attention or to participate in an activity, or they might be trying to obtain an item. They also might be trying to get away from these very same things. When we look at behavior this way, we can see that behavior serves as a form of communication. If we take a moment to stop to analyze the functions of behavior, we can figure out what the students are trying to tell us through their behavior. Whether we intervene or not, students will learn the best way to obtain an outcome. Unfortunately, problem behaviors are often the best way for students to obtain an outcome. Once we identify what the function of the behavior serves, we can create a behavior intervention plan that will develop replacement behaviors for the undesired behaviors. This way, we can help students find appropriate ways to obtain whatever it is their behavior is seeking. When working with teachers who are working with students with challenging behaviors, I often hear things like, "It just comes out of nowhere," or "all of a sudden, he blanked for no reason." Well, this is typically untrue. Science has shown us that oftentimes human behavior is very predictable. By studying the antecedents and the consequences that are related to the behavior, we are often able to figure out when problem behaviors will occur. So what is an antecedent? The antecedent is the action or the stimuli that occurs immediately before the behavior. The antecedent might be something as simple as a teacher giving a direction, or, in the case of my dog, a cat appearing in the window. The antecedent is what happened immediately before the behavior occurs. Consequences, however, are the events that happen immediately after the behavior occurs. The consequence can help reinforce the behavior, even unintentionally. For example, a child continually interrupting story time. This is the behavior. When the child interrupts the behavior, the teacher says, "You need to wait your turn." If the function of the child's behavior is to get attention from the teacher, even the consequence of the teacher telling the child to wait their turn can reinforce the behavior. Remember, when we are talking about antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, the consequence is merely the action that happens after the behavior. It does not necessarily mean something bad, as it often is referred to in our daily conversations. Consequence is just whatever happens immediately after the behavior occurs. Whether it is good or bad at this stage is not as important as trying to analyze the antecedents, the behaviors, and the consequences related to the behavior. Let's take a moment to look at these examples. We have an antecedent where the teacher is grading papers at her desk and is not looking at the student Eric. So Eric starts singing and humming until the teacher responds. The teacher looks up at Eric and asks him what he wants. Then he says he has a question, so the teacher answers the question. In this scenario, the antecedent is the teacher grading papers and not looking up. The behavior is the singing and the humming. And the consequence of the singing and the humming is that the teacher asks him, "Do you need something?" Let's look at another scenario involving Eric. The teacher is helping another student. Eric starts sighing and banging on the paper. The teacher walks over to Eric and provides help. Again, the antecedent is that the teacher is helping someone else. The behavior is that the student is sighing and banging, and the consequence of that behavior is that the teacher walks over and provides help. Okay, last one. The teacher, again, not attending to Eric while he is working, so Eric pounds on the desk. The teacher tells Eric to raise his hand. Once again, she asks if he needs help. When we look at all three of these scenarios together, we can predict that the function of the behavior is that Eric is seeking attention from the teacher. He needs help with his work. Let's read the following scenarios. The teacher says, "It is time to line up." Then Sally screams, "I don't want to go." The teacher walks over to Sally and guides her to the line. Again, let's see another scenario. The teacher says, "It's time for lunch." Then Sally starts screaming, "I don't want to go." Again, the teacher walks over to Sally and guides her to the line. The situation happens again in a similar way. The teacher says, "Okay, class, let's stop what we are doing," and then continues on with the direction. Again, Sally starts screaming, "I don't want to." The consequence, or the situation that occurs right after the behavior, is that the teacher walks over to Sally and repeats the direction. Sometimes we do not have all the information we need to clearly decide the function of behavior just by completing the ABC chart. In this instance, the function of the behavior might be to get away from lining up and going somewhere. Or the function of the behavior might be to keep playing. This is why it can be important to look at the overall setting to determine the function of the behavior. What if I tell you that the previous scenarios only happened when Sally was playing with Play-Doh? Does this change what the function of the behavior might be? In this case, I would guess that Sally wanted to keep playing Play-Doh rather than trying to avoid lining up. She liked lining up and going to other activities and usually wanted to be the line leader. So Play-Doh might be part of the trigger that increased the likelihood of the behavior occurring. I hope this helps you see that we have to consider everything in the child's sitting, as well as the antecedents, the behaviors, and the consequences. Here is another example of when we need to consider the setting. Some days Eric comes to school with a smile on his face. On these days, his behavior is typically quote-unquote good behavior. Some days Eric comes to school with a frown on his face. On these days, he typically has trouble following directions and getting along with friends. When we experience situations like this, we might ask ourselves, is this going to be one of those days? A better idea, though, would be to try to examine the entire setting. Examining the entire setting allows us to look for setting events. The simple explanation of a setting event would be to describe it as an event that happens before a behavior is exhibited that impacts the likelihood of this behavior occurring. These events can increase the likelihood or decrease the likelihood of a behavior occurring. There are some events that may have impacted Eric's behavior when he got to school. One of them could be that his mom put him on the bus instead of driving him to school. Maybe he had to have cereal instead of the pancakes that he wanted for breakfast. Maybe he had a fight with his sister. Any of these events could be impacting his current behavior. There are many questions we can ask as we try to determine the setting events. We can ask, what academic or non-academic activities are most associated with a student's problem behavior? What changes in routines set the stage for the problem behaviors to occur? What time of day are the problem behaviors occurring most frequently? Does the problem behavior occur in particular classrooms, with particular teachers, or during particular assignments? Also, when, where, and with whom are the behaviors least or most prevalent? Are some of the setting events occurring at home or on the way to school? Asking these questions can help us learn to predict and prevent problem behaviors. One of the best ways to predict future behaviors is to analyze the function of the behavior by looking more closely at using the ABC data. There are many ABC or antecedent behavior consequence data forms that are used to try to determine the function of a behavior. The simplest forms include a date, time and setting information, and then the ABC columns. Teachers, depending on the behavior, can complete these forms during the time of day when the behavior occurs most frequently, or across the day to try to determine when the behaviors are occurring. But sometimes the ABCs are not as clear-cut as our previous examples. Let's take a look. Let's use this example. Alyssa wanted to play with her new tea set. She said, "Mom, can I play with the tea set?" Her mom said, "Not right now. That needs adult help, and I need to finish doing laundry first." Then Alyssa screams, "But Mom, I want to play with the tea set." Her mom says, "Honey, I said no. You could play with the cups in your play kitchen." Alyssa starts screaming, "I want to play," and keeps screaming. Charting this example can get a little trickier because many of the consequences and antecedents will overlap. Let's take a look. The first antecedent is that Alyssa wanted to play with her new tea set. So her behavior was to ask her mom, "Mom, can I play with the tea set?" Then her mom said, "Not right now." Well, after her mom said, "Not right now," the immediate behavior was screaming, "But I want to play with the tea set." So the consequence of "not right now" also serves as the antecedent for the screaming. After she screams, "But I want to play with her tea set," her mom said, "Honey, I said no. You can play with the cups in your kitchen." After her mom says no, Alyssa starts screaming. So again, we can see that the consequence leads to the antecedent for the next behavior, which is screaming, "I want to play." This is how you will be charting a lot of the ABCs on the assignment that's contained in this lesson. So you can see that charting the antecedents, behaviors, and consequences can be a little tricky, but once you get the hang of it, you will find that it is not too overly challenging. Just remember, even though we have presented simple examples in this PowerPoint for demonstration purposes, collecting ABC data often has to be repeated over time to truly be able to find the function of the behavior. Oftentimes, we have to form a hypothesis as to the function of the behavior. The hypothesis is our best guess that is based on our ABC data. We then use this hypothesis to select our strategies for the behavior intervention plan we design. We test the hypothesis by implementing the plan. If, after a period of time, the plan helps the students to change their behavior, then we probably selected the correct function of the behavior. Remember, the purpose of completing a functional behavior assessment, or an FBA, is to help find the correct strategy to help the child learn a different behavior. We are not trying to manipulate the child. We are trying to stop the most extreme behaviors that cause harm from occurring. We try to stop the behavior from occurring because we know that behavior is changeable. When we understand the function of the behavior with its predictors and its consequences, we can make the behavior irrelevant by eliminating the need for the child to do the problem behavior, inefficient by teaching the child an alternative way to produce the desired outcome, or ineffective by not allowing the child to get what he or she wants through the problem behavior. Doing so makes way for the child to need to learn more positive behaviors to get something or to get away from something. In closure, as you begin thinking about completing FBAs, or functional behavior assessments, it is important to remember that all behavior serves a function. In order to determine the function, we have to examine the antecedents, behaviors, and consequences surrounding the behavior. We also need to remember that behavior is a form of communication. Finally, remember the whole purpose of doing a functional behavior assessment is to identify the functions of the behavior for the purpose of improving our intervention outcomes.